we implemented audits in our feed mill operations, as we started building the overall feed safety program. And it was under the premise, it's inspect what you expect. Audits can be a very useful resource if they're used for continuous improvement. Where we see them being used incorrectly is when they're used as a hammer, and we wanted to try to, utilize an audit to hopefully drive continuous improvement, to engage employees and train them on expectations. So the next time we come back through that feed mill to do an audit, we see an improvement in that particular process. And so it becomes really an educational tool for the feed mill. And obviously, it goes back to, this whole premise of continuous improvement. And we frankly moved to a Lean Sigma approach in our feed mills.
Welcome everyone to today's episodes of the Feed Science podcast show. I have two very special guests, Dr. Omarh Mendoza, who is the Director of Nutrition at Mashoff, and Aaron Gaines, Managing Director of Anitech. How are you doing?
Very good.
Very good, thanks.
And first I would like to know if you can share a little bit about your professional background with the audits.
Yes, I'll go first, Wilmer. First of all, thanks for having us here and sharing the screen here with you and Aaron. So my background goes back to my home state of Sonora, Northwest Mexico, where I pursued my undergraduate degree in animal sciences with a focus in swine. And then after that, I was able to find a spot at the University of Illinois, worked under Dr. Mike Ellis on applied production and nutrition, where I was able to get my master's and PhD program. And at the time, I connected to the Mashoffs through the research program jointly with University of Illinois. And that's where I got to meet Aaron and then came to work for the Mashoffs. And it'll be here 12 years this fall. And my role is Director of Nutrition.
All right. Good morning, Wilmer. Thanks for having us on this morning. And I grew up in Northeast Missouri and went to University of Missouri and got my bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees there. Been in the feed industry for 20 plus years. Worked for a feed company, worked for two production companies prior to starting Anitech in 2017. Prior to Anitech, worked with Omarh at the Mashoffs, as he alluded to. So spent a little over a decade there. Working with both live animal operations and the technical operations of the Mashoffs. So I look forward to sharing more insight on feed milling with the audience today. And thank you again for having us.
Evonik Animal Nutrition is committed to ensure food security and safety while reducing the ecological footprint of animal farming. Its products and services use evidence-based solutions that seek to promote animal welfare and reduce reliance on natural resources. All this is underpinned by long-standing industry partnerships and deep customer understanding. Evonik's focus on efficiency, sustainable, healthy nutrition, and collaborations with livestock farming partners creates value for customers and consumers.
Thank you. And one of the questions that I would like to ask you both is in feed milling, sometimes we work with people from different backgrounds and with different skills, and safety is extremely important in feed milling. So I would like to know more about what is your management strategy as related with safety, and how do you train your employees?
Well, I'll take that and then let Omarh jump in as well. I mean, safety, for a feed mill has got to be a top priority, and it's got to be part of the culture. And unfortunately, based on our past experience, our safety program got accelerated because we had 2 mill explosions. And it was honestly a freak deal in both cases. But it did accelerate the company to invest in a safety program. We were working on it, but it really sped it up. And when you have 2 mills that have experienced that, it's easier to get buy-in around that safety program. But, unfortunately, those two situations happened, but we turned them into a positive because we're able to really be the safety champions for the organization and put together a safety program that was able to be leveraged across the organization. So, again, it just starts with you got to have a leader within that feed mill that believes in the importance of safety, and that becomes a part of the culture day in, day out.
That is really good, and one of the things I think is important as it is related with safety is like feed milling, the training of the feed mill employees. So, what would be your advice about like how often that needs to be done? Should they do it like once a month or how often?
I would say, based on our experience, and totally agree with what Aaron mentioned, it becomes a culture thing and not just a program. And one thing that we've seen is, having the mill manager take ownership. Yes, there will be requirements in terms of audits, safety audits, visits, but it's a day in, day out approach, Wilmer. The managers that really engage with their employees, when they're performing whatever task, it could be running the forklift or filling bins or having to repair equipment, safety is always the top of mind. So, yes, it's a daily thing, weekly, and then obviously once the audit or the inspections come about, there's going to be no surprises, but it is one of the non-negotiables. People first is what we preach, and what maintains our employees safe and able to return home as they came to us.
Yeah, and I think something that what you mentioned is extremely important, because management, it needs to start from the top, right? And sometimes, in order to have a safe environment, the top management needs to provide the tools necessary, right? Hard hats, like our goggles, etc. So that is very important. And another aspect that I feel that is important in feed processing, and this is related with safety too, is the maintenance, right? Of both, preventive and corrective maintenance. How do you see the importance of maintenance, not only, from the safety perspective, but also from the efficiency perspective?
Yeah, for a period of time, we did not operate the mills with a dedicated maintenance person. That was a shared responsibility. And then after we implemented a safety program and started building out our PM program, or preventive maintenance program, we identified, the need to have a dedicated maintenance person. You alluded to the safety aspects of it, but, you start looking at that PM program and the importance of it as it relates to downtime. If you've got a feed mill that, has got limited capacity, and you have a situation where you lose a piece of equipment, whether that's the mixer goes down or the pellet mill, that downtime can get really expensive, particularly if you got to move tonnage to another mill or you have out of feed events. So that becomes a performance issue and a welfare issue as well. And so the other piece of it is when we started investing in a preventive maintenance program, we were able to lower our R&M cost. That was very apparent. And so when you start looking at that investment in human capital of a dedicated maintenance manager, it pays. It pays from a safety standpoint, it pays from an R&M standpoint, and it pays from reducing downtime at that feed mill.
Excellent. And, also, as it relates with maintenance, also, as you're mentioning, it is efficiency. So, from the key performance objectives, can you like if a maintenance program is working, good, or what would be, like other or the key performance objectives where you would focus the most in a feed mill?
I think one example, Wilmer, is one of the things that provides evidence that the PM or preventive maintenance program is working is one of the things that Aaron alluded to is the reduction of downtime. As we know, feed mills are mechanical, and they're going to break down. So but having a good preventive maintenance will not only help with the safety aspect first and foremost, but will ensure that the mill and all the mechanical parts are going to be running, that there's going to be the spare parts needed, the tools needed to get the job done. So from our perspective, one thing that we review on a daily basis across all of our internal mills, we have a daily call where our mill managers report any issues, any downtime, and there's a calculation of mill efficiency. And that mill efficiency allows us to understand, is the mill running to its capability, given all the things that were planned for that week, including planned downtime, repairs and maintenance. And that's one of the things that we do to make sure that it's tracking along.
That is really good. And with and how do you typically do the maintenance? Because when I was working in a field mill in North Carolina, depending on the type of project, we could do that maintenance internally, or if it was a major project, sometimes we would use external people. Could you mention some advantages or disadvantages of doing it internally or externally?
Yeah, I mean, what we try to do is hire a person within to do the PM program. And, we had a preventive maintenance schedule that person was responsible for. You get into some of the more extensive projects, then we'd bring in a third-party millwright company to help, get that project executed. And, just one maintenance manager only has, so much time to do PM, and you throw on a major capital project, whether it's a new roller mill or a new pelleter, it just exceeds their ability to do that. And so that's where you bring in a third party that's, specialized in doing that. And that's a good balance to have both internal and external resources for the feed mill for, PM and then your larger capital projects.
Yeah, man, you did mention, roller mills. And do you typically use more roller mills or hammer mills in your facilities?
So about a decade ago, most of the grinding equipment on our internal mills would have been roller mills. We had a combination of 2 pairs up to 3 pair roller mills, but here as time has progressed, we have evolved not only here with our internal mills, but some of our toll mill partners, to hammer milling technology. So we still have today a roller mill as the backup mill, or whenever we gotta have a coarser form, but typically the main grinding equipment today will be hammer mills.
Hammer mills. And what would be the target particle size that would you suggest that is important, for swine?
Good question. And believe it or not, in the swine space, there's still quite a bit of debate in terms of, what is the proper particle size. If you go and collect 3 different guide documents or guidance documents, you'll find different degrees. But typically, the particle size that's most accepted is about 500 microns. I would say that would be around industry average. Obviously, it will depend if your feed form. If it's in mash, probably 500 microns would be your lower level, more so 600. And then obviously, if you are feeding pelleted diets, that'll allow us to go to a lower micron size. And again, there's different specification if you're feeding grow finished animals versus sows or breeding stock. But probably pelleted diets, you would see an average around 300 to 400 microns.
Omarh, to clarify, that's without a flow agent? Good point, Aaron. So as hammer mill technologies has continued to
come into the industry, I think the use of a flow agent have allowed us to have a more precise and accurate determination of the particle size, especially as you go to a finer micron size. But yes, those will be without flow agent. With the flow agent impact, you'll see anywhere between 75 to 100 micron reduction from our experience.
Yeah, and I think something that is very important, I even try to tell the companies about the importance of flowing agents, right? Particularly if they are evaluating the particle size of the meal, because you are already adding some fats, and that flow agent prevents those particles to agglomerate. So that's very important. But something that you mentioned is like the difference between mash diets and pellet diets is more like not as related as digestibility, but more related to flowing characteristics in the feeder, right?
Correct. So the main aspect as to differentiate pelleted diets versus mash diets in terms of the particle size will be flowability first and foremost. We had the experience, and I think Aaron would agree that whenever a mash diet was delivered with a fine micron size, flowability at the bin level and even at the feeder level was causing issues. And if it's very fine, it could lead to out of feed events, which are not good for the pigs. So that's where we have learned to establish a minimum threshold when feeding a mash diet. With pelleted diets, then you can take advantage of the feed form and then take advantage also of the increased digestibility from a lower micron size.
The other thing on not only mean particle size, particularly in mash diets, but also particle size standard deviation, that's something we observed. You start seeing an increase in particle size standard deviation, and you start having some flow challenges in mash diets in particular.
And that's very important, because one of the questions that I had in my mind right now is like, because right now you can use hammer mills and roller mills, and roller mills are gonna give you like a more uniform particle size with better flowability characteristics. I was gonna ask you like, can you get like the same if you have hammer mills with variable frequency drives? Because, like now we can just change the RPMs of the motor and then just increase the particle size. Would that be like similar to what you can get in a roller mill, or you still are going to have like a higher variation in particle size?
Yeah, good question. Yes. So the general rule of thumb is that yes, with a hammer mill, you can either achieve the same particle size or, go to a lower geometric mean particle size. But typically you would see a higher standard deviation. There's still, from my perspective, and this is, I'll leave this to our operation leaders, but, working with the BFDs and, the air assist and all the different parameters when it comes to hammer milling, certainly it's possible, but, there's a degree of know-how. And the other aspect is, the frequency of the measurement, right? So, having measurements on a daily basis versus weekly basis would allow you to understand that variation a lot better.
I mean, I will say with some of the newer hammer mill technologies, that standard deviation has definitely improved. We've definitely narrowed the gap between roller mills and hammer mills, to Omar's point, with just newer technology and air assist and some of those things that help reduce particle size standard deviation.
And I think something that is very important that you mentioned is to know the variation, right? And if we know that variation, we know how often we need to measure it, right? Things that are more variable, we probably need to measure it more frequently.
Yes. I continue learning a little bit about how the poultry industry values particle size, but certainly in the swine spaces has been really well defined that as you decrease particle size, from 100 microns reduction, I mean, that's going to be equivalent to about a 1% feed efficiency. The range is from 0.8 to 1.2. So 1% feed efficiency in a time of high feed costs is really valuable. So therefore, that is one of the metrics that is, our feed mills really key in terms of frequency. If it's roller mill, there's probably going to be twice a day or once per shift. With a hammer mill being a little bit more consistent, there's a one measurement, per day at least, but most often two. So that allows you to do some trend analysis. I mean, you're not looking at it on a daily basis, but certainly looking at it on a weekly basis and making sure that you're not only staying on target, but that the trend is positive, and then it's staying within your limits on the upper and the lower side.
And how did you find that balance? Because in swine, as you mentioned it, as you decrease auricle size, you can improve feed efficiency, but your throughput might go down, and your cents per dollar per ton of or dollars per ton of ground material is gonna go up. So what considerations do the company needs to take? Cost of feed ingredient, cost of energy. I don't know, what defines that optimal auricle size.
Yeah, no, it's good question. It's all about a balance, right? So I think one approach that we took is try to understand, what our target was going to be, and then right sizing the equipment. Although that is difficult because things change. Certainly, we have been in instances where due to feed volume coming to a feed mill, we were not able to achieve the desired particle size. As you said, as you go to a lower particle size, the throughput is going to decrease. So there's some gives, but certainly the approach is to continue to get to it. But there will be times where the throughput is going to win. Animals need to get fed, so there's some of that. Give and take to balance it out, but it starts with the understanding your equipment capability and going from there.
Excellent. And I think when to understand equipment and understand the feed mill itself, audits are very important, right? So do you do or do you suggest to do some internal audits as they relate to, safety, product quality, or process improvement?
Yeah, I'll just kind of speak to kind of the principles behind the audit. I mean, we implemented audits in our feed mill operations, as we started building the overall feed safety program. And it is under the premise, it's inspect what you expect. Audits can be a very useful resource if they're used for continuous improvement. Where we see them being used incorrectly is when they're used as a hammer, and we wanted to try to, utilize an audit to hopefully drive continuous improvement, to engage employees and train them on expectations. So the next time we come back through that feed mill to do an audit, we see an improvement in that particular process. And so it becomes really an educational tool for the feed mill. And obviously, it goes back to, this whole premise of continuous improvement. And we frankly moved to a Lean Sigma approach in our feed mills. And I know we haven't touched on that, but, it really focused on, really the 4 pillars: sustainability, quality, delivery, and cost. And audits were certainly a piece of that Lean Sigma approach. But again, we can get into more of how we set those audits up. But, again, it's a very useful tool if used appropriately.
Excellent. And can you share a little bit more about that tool? I think it's going to be important for the audience, how you do it.
Yeah, Omarh, you guys probably have evolved that tool quite a bit. So won't you speak to how you guys are using those audits as far as the detail?
Sure. And, the different audits can have are dependent on different programs. So we talked earlier about, safety. So obviously safety, there's a specific audit. There's regulatory compliance, as we all know. So there's audits that are going to be looking into the things that will get us compliant into some of the regulatory aspects, namely, Food Safety Modernization Act. And then another one of the audits, and it goes back to what Aaron was mentioning on utilizing Lean Sigma methodologies for process improvement. So, and I'll take a few moments here to describe what that looks like. So, not only producing a feed product that's going to be safe, not only for the employees that are working at the feed mill, but obviously ultimately for the animals. In our case, livestock, what it's going to achieve and those specifications. So it requires monitoring and measuring your processes. Earlier, we talked about particle size, how particle size needs to be measured correctly, having standardized equipment. In the case of particle size, 13 rotop sieve shaker across all mills. If you're talking about corn moisture, having, dedicated time to where that's being done on a daily basis, and pellet quality. So those are some of the examples that are on the macro level on process verification, but then we can take it even further to understand the process capability of our scales, process capability of the augers that are delivering the ingredients, all with the intent to not only balance quality, cost, and reduction of downtime.
That's extremely important. What you're mentioning, because you need to know the equipment that you have at the feed mill and capabilities, right? And I don't know how many feed mills do you have, because as you are mentioning, there are so many different ways to analyze particle size, and if two feed mills are using two different methodologies, then you cannot compare you cannot compare the particle size of the pellet quality across feed mills.
Absolutely. One of the things that is part of Lean Sigma methodology is understanding your measurement system, right? It can be a point of variation. And certainly we found that. Maybe two feed mills were measuring particle size, but they were using perhaps the same instrument, but a different process, or in some cases, a different measurement system altogether. Example, the most recommended methodology is using the 13 sieve rotop sieve shaker, but there's also the 3 sieve, and certainly that's going to give you different values, and you're going to be scratching your head if you do not recognize measurement system differences. So that is one thing that we have been working on, try to standardize methodology across feed mills. We had asked Wilmer how many feed mills we have. We have 4 internal feed mills that'll manufacture around 50% of our feed, but then we have a combination of close to 15 external toll mills, and with that you would expect some differences, not only in instrument but process. The main two ones that we've been discussing here would be particle size and pellet quality. On the pellet quality side, our recommendation is to use the tumbler methodology as reported by K-State University, and using the modified tumbler methodology with the hex nuts, we have seen that being more repeatable. And while not absolute, it would allow us to understand differences across feed mills and even within the same feed mill.
That's really good. And even, just to comment in some of the things that I see, sometimes it's like when the companies are analyzing particle size, not so much in the US, but in other regions, it's like they are using the full height sieves, which are 3 inches in height. So when they want to place them in the machine, they can only place 6 or 7. 6. They can place all the 13 sieves. So they are not going to have a good representation of the particle size, or when they are doing pellet quality, as you know, we need to use a specific sieve to remove the fines when we are doing pellet quality, and that kind of affects their results. So
certainly, we've seen examples where we were seeing the feeder fines being different, and I'm not going to remember the right one, but I think it was either a 6 or a 7, and they were using the other one. So that's part of the value of not only a remote audit, which I didn't talk about, but, we call remote audit is looking at the data that's being submitted by the different feed mills on a weekly basis. We can do that all here from our central offices, but then being in person at the feed mill, it allows you to, look at the person performing the task, how the sample is collected, the points of temperature measurement, in the case of pelleted feed.
That is really good. I guess like my last kind of technical question is like how do you like the objectives from sometimes for the feed mill are gonna be like different than the objectives at the farm. When you were talking about like particle size, sometimes like the feed mill might need to increase 50 micron because they need to make sure that they are getting the feed in front of the animals. How do you balance those objectives between what the farm is looking for and what the feed mill can do?
Yeah, I would say, for us, over time, we needed to make sure that the feed mill program aligned with the company goals and customer expectations. The feed mill cannot operate in a silo away from the rest of the company. Everybody should be focused on the end goal, and that's profit per pig, right? And so you got to make sure that the feed mill is aligned with those company goals, and it goes back to measurement. And I mentioned the SQDC concept, or sustainability, quality, delivery, cost. We utilize SQDC boards in our feed mills. That's a way to convey how a process is performing. So if you're achieving the goal or target, it's going to be in green. And if you're not, it's in red. And the employee or the manager is recording that data on a daily or weekly basis to know whether they're winning or losing for the company. And so you start breaking down that SQDC board and take S for sustainability. We put a lot of emphasis on safety in that sustainability bucket. So we're taking measurements like no near misses, no unsafe work practices as an example, and those are getting recorded. On the quality side, Omarh talked about that. We were measuring particle size, very intensely because it's a big driver for feed conversion. A lot of dollars, opportunity cost if you're not at targeted particle size. And then pellet quality, looking at percent feeder fines on the quality side. Delivery, the metrics we utilized there were, tons per hour. We done that by shift. We also looked at the efficiency metric in terms of actual tons versus theoretical. And then we also looked at cost. Cost is not going to be a daily measurement. It's going to be more of a monthly measurement as it relates to tons per hour. And then you can break that down even further. But to your point, I think the main thing is making sure the feed mill has the company goals in mind. And those things are aligned, because if they're not, you're going to create a lot of issues between the feed mill and your customer. At the end of the day, the feed mill works for production. That is your customer. And so once you get that alignment, things go a lot better. But you can't have separate metrics for the feed mill that are independent of the company level goals.
And just I couldn't agree more. There's always that dichotomy of, the feed mill versus live production, and it's going to be different, right? A feed company that its sole purpose is to provide, feed to customers is going to have, throughput metrics and quality metrics. But in the case of internal milling for a livestock producer, in this case, pigs, is, understanding the why and explaining the why, what the feed mill has to, meet certain parameters, whether there's a quality aspect. We know that not all the time, but mostly all the time, things that will improve quality will reduce throughput. So that's always that balance, right? Obviously, we cannot, look at quality in isolation or throughput. So it takes really a team effort. We cannot come and set specifications in a silo as well. Hey, I want to arrive to this micron size. The feed mill may not have the equipment. So it requires, back and forth. There's always some discussion and debate, which, creates healthy debate and allows us to improve. But having the mentality of continuous improvement process is also going to be key. And then just a final comment, like I mentioned, 50% of our volume comes from external mills, and some of their metrics are going to be different than ours. And it just takes, a relationship, getting into the feed mills, discussing why are these things important to a livestock producer. And it's always a balance as a day, it's a week to week, but it all hinges on data monitoring and reporting. And, having the system to do so are going to be critical.
And I think one of the biggest things that looking back at that we did to make sure that our customer understood that the feed mill was on their team was getting them into the feed mills. A lot of the production team members had never been in a feed mill. And so just giving them that invite and going through the feed mill and showing them the processes and the amount of science that goes into feed milling and the amount of technology, it blows them away. And so that's the one thing I would, I guess anybody that's listening to this, make sure you engage your customer, get them in the feed mill, make sure they understand the why behind your processes and the fact that you are there to support them and the company's goals. But I mean, if you can do that, it just changes the whole relationship between feed mills and production to know that you guys are working together, and you got to have that open line of communication, and vice versa. A lot of feed mill employees have never been at the farm, and they need to get out on the farm and understand some of the practices that happen on farm and some of the struggles as it relates to feed bins and the different feed line setups and some of the challenges they face. So you can start connecting the dots and look at continuous improvement, because, the one thing that Dr. Walter always preached to us, Dr. Walter, he's the CEO of Mashaw's, is that the feed doesn't stop at the feed mill. It stops at the pig's mouth. And I think that's critically important, that the feed mill owns that feed all the way to the pig.
Yeah, and as you're mentioning, communication is extremely important, right? So we almost, we just have like 5 minutes left, and one of the things that I like is like doing this podcast. I know like a lot of students listen to this podcast, and you and I were students a few years ago. What kind of advice would you give, to the graduates and other valued students on how they can use their time in the university to prepare better and have a more successful career once that they enter the industry?
I'll share a little bit of my experience, and then I'll let Aaron share his comments. But for me, yes, I wanted to focus on the area of swine nutrition, and obviously have received training in animal physiology and metabolism. But the aspect that I was passionate about is about the applied side or the industry side. So I was fortunate enough that I was able to participate in a couple of internships, one with the mash outs when I was a student, and allow me to really understand, real world production, getting into a feed mill. Obviously we had experience, mixing research diets at the university mill, but, while the principles are the same, the scale and the speed at which it moves is really different. And, it just allowed me to have a better understanding of, how to apply my training. So for all those students that are, wanting to go into the animal space, animal nutrition, independent of species, having access to milling experience is going to be key. And most companies, including ours, will be very open. We host tours very frequently. We bring students for externships, just for them to go and feel and what it looks like, commercial feed production. So, reaching out to folks in the industry, there's plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree with Omar. Internships are very important for identifying, what field you want to go into, and also giving you a lot of exposure to a network within the industry. But one of the things, kind of looking back on my formal training that we typically don't get is leadership development training. It's not a formal There's not a formal class for it. And so you got to kind of go seek that out on your own. And, some companies, the mass shops did invest in leadership development training programs. They're very beneficial. I got to experience that and grow from that. But that's something for younger people that are listening to this podcast is you need to take advantage of any opportunity you can to get in a leadership development program, because that will be so invaluable as you get into your career long term. Because this, the ag industry is a people business, and we need good leaders, and every one of us has the capability of being a leader, whether you recognize it or not. And there's a lot of good tools and resources out there to help you, but you got to take advantage of them. So look for those opportunities.
Just to bolt on Aaron's comment, one thing that, when students ask me, so what's your recommendation? Completely agree as well. If you're understanding your training, and obviously you're receiving either, an undergraduate or postgraduate degree that is, you are training that, in my case, I said, pigs, feed, that's the easy part. Working with the people, it's, the difficult part. So, everybody's going to be a leader. Doesn't matter if you have direct reports. Leadership is the ability to influence. So, understanding the soft skills and getting to know yourself, and how you communicate is going to be key.
Excellent.